Professor Haseler. First question would be, what is the argument of the new book? What historical process does it address? What exactly is it analysing?
What it's analysing is how we got into this huge debt credit crisis, which in my view is a crisis of capitalism itself. Certainly finance capitalism, maybe capitalism itself. How we got into it, and I argue in this book, we didn't get into it by accident, and we didn't get into it over a short period. The problems which led to this crisis, I argue, started way back in the late 1980s, and were developed in the 1990s through a whole number of political, not just economic decisions. Globalization, the spread of global capital around the world, the low incomes of Western working people, which then led to a growth of credit in order to keep their incomes up, because our economies needed a consumption base to grow. All of these factors I try and set out in the book, and I also try and argue who the policymakers were and when they took these policy decisions that have led to this crisis. For instance, I don't put the full blame on this on bankers. I mean, bankers are a big aspect of it. But the policy decisions which allowed our bankers to go down this road were made by politicians, starting with Bill Clinton and Alan Greenspan, supported in Britain by Tony Blair, and other Anglo-American political leaders, as they set up this whole neoliberal economic construct. So that's the basis of the book. It tries to go into a little more detail, giving this crisis a political explanation as well as an economic and financial one.
So, if that, so to speak, brings us up to the present crisis, what does the book have to say about the future and where we go from here?
Right. Well, one thing the book says about the future is we must look at the mistakes of the past, see where the basic problem lay, in order to look at the future. And what I say is that the basic problem lies in this deregulated economy. It lies in an unfettered globalization, which simply allowed our companies and banks and so on to go out to Asia and so on with low prices and low costs. It lies in the inability of governments to control, either to have a proper international system to control the global economy, and that therefore fixing this problem must take into account the gaps that took place in creating it. Now, as far as Britain is concerned, where we are now, and Europe is concerned, as opposed to the United States, my argument is what it's always been, really, for the last 15, 20 years in earlier books I've written, that we do need a strong European regulatory system to handle this banking crisis and to handle what's coming. The only way to get that is further integration within the European Union. And one other thing I do in this book is I start with politics and I end with politics. I talk about the new world which is coming, which is, in my view, a multipolar world in which we're going to have the United States, Europe, China, maybe the regional groupings in Latin America and so on. But this is the coming world order that is going to emerge, and that it's going to emerge. We're not going to have one single neoliberal market capitalist system stretching across the world. We're not going to have that, which was the vision of the neoconservatives and the vision of Washington and Wall Street. That's not going to happen. We're going to have multipolar centres, and as far as Europe is concerned, it's going to be one of them. And so in order to survive in this coming world, we need to strengthen the European system. So, and then, and this is my final point in the book, I argue that America is going to have to adjust in this new world. Everyone knows it. We talk here about on the eve of probably a new president in the United States, definitely a new president, probably one who's going to be quite radical in his policies. Can America adjust, in my view, to no longer being the top banana in the world, Can America adjust to no longer being the centre of everything? Can it adjust to being one power amongst others? Is a very big question, not just for Americans but for Europeans as well, because the coming world I see is one in which Europe and China, as well as the United States, are going to have to take up the slack of world leadership. That is now, there's a vacuum created by this new system. So I do deal with that a bit at the end, so the basic argument is that the problems that caused this collapse have to be analysed in order to be able to try and resolve and look at how we should deal with it in the future. Multipolar world with more regulation, more state, less market, not the end of the market, it's to save the market system, but more state, less market, more regulation, and a greater social dimension to our life, a bigger concern about society and inequalities than we've had in what I call the neoliberal era.